into a deeply emotional narrative from ancient history. We're going to visualize a story of raw pain, intense rivalry, and ultimately the discovery of a profound higher purpose, right in the middle of severe affliction. Let's dive in. We're starting right here, anchored by this incredibly heavy text from 1 Samuel chapter 1. And she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. You can almost literally feel the dark clouds framing those words. This isn't just some minor disappointment. We're looking at a woman named Hannah in absolute, soul-crushing distress. She is completely vulnerable, just weeping bitterly.
So let's look at part 1. The bitter competition, a toxic rivalry.
To really get what Hannah is going through, we have to picture her household dynamic. Her husband, Elkanah, had 2 wives, Hannah and a woman named Peninnah. And the contrast between these two is just striking. On one side, you have Peninnah. She has children, but instead of being grateful for that blessing, she uses them to mock. She's treating life as this cruel, zero-sum competition. Then, on the other side, you have Hannah. She's barren, she's tormented, and she's constantly weeping from the daily mockery. But notice the crucial difference in her reaction here. Instead of lashing out, Hannah takes that immense bitterness and turns it inward and upward, straight into prayer. It is such a powerful reminder that possessing a blessing should inspire compassion in us, not mockery. You know, when people lose sight of a higher purpose, when they don't know God, life basically devolves into a ruthless game of tug-of-war. Literally, everything begins to look like a competition. It is an absolute tragedy to see someone celebrating another person's pain, acting as if they've won the lottery just because someone else is struggling. Because the truth is, the tables of life can turn at any moment. It could easily have been you in that exact same position of suffering. It really makes you stop and ask, did you think of the pain that your friend is going through? We see this exact same cruelty play out in our modern generation all the time. People celebrate when others fail. They essentially become tormentors. But seriously, how would you feel if it were you? Empathy is the one thing that separates us from the cruelty of treating life like a giant scoreboard.
Which brings us to part 2, a vow from the pain, seeking higher purpose.
Now, this is the pivotal moment of revelation in Hannah's life. This is where she transforms that raw desperation into something incredibly powerful. As you can see, she takes a highly structured path to step entirely out of the chaos of her rivalry. She starts in deep affliction. She moves from that pain into fervent prayer. Within that prayer, she makes a vow, and that vow ultimately aligns her completely with God's purpose. She isn't just asking for a quick way out of her pain. She's stepping into a much higher calling. Just listen to the exact words of that vow. She prayed, saying that if the Lord would not forget her, but, quote, "Give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head." That is a striking promise. She's essentially taking the ancient Nazirite vow on behalf of her unborn son. By declaring no razor would cut his hair, she was using the ultimate cultural symbol of absolute 100% devotion to God. Hannah had this massive revelation right in the middle of her pain. She realized that the blessing she was begging for wasn't just for her own personal comfort, or even to silence her rival, Peninnah. She realized that everything on this earth is supposed to serve God's purpose. She asked for a son so she could turn around and give him right back for divine utility. Moving into part 3, humility before the priest. Grace under pressure. Okay, so right after making this intense vow, Hannah faces another major hurdle. Eli, the priest, sees her praying silently but fervently. Her lips are moving, but there's no sound coming out. And he makes a terrible, honestly kind of baffling assumption. He thinks she's drunk. I mean, imagine pouring your bitter soul out to God, and the religious leader assumes you've just had way too much wine at the festival. She could have easily been furious, right? But look at her response. She is completely respectful and humble. She simply says, "No, my lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit." Her humility takes a moment of harsh, totally unfair judgment and turns it into an incredible opportunity for grace. And because she answered with such gentleness, Eli's entire demeanor shifted. He went from being a harsh critic to a comforter. He pronounced a blessing over her, telling her that the God of Israel would grant her petition. In her moment of seeking comfort, entirely because of her humble posture, she received a profound blessing. That leads us right to part 4, the promise kept, dedication and blessing. And man, does God ever grant that petition. This is the triumphant climax of the whole historical narrative. Hannah gives birth to a son, Samuel, and exactly as she promised, she brings him back to the temple to dedicate him to the Lord. And just think about the massive historical impact of this one life. Samuel was dedicated entirely to the Lord. He was used mightily by God as a prophet and a judge. He was the actual man who anointed David as king of Israel. And the texts tell us that none of his words fell to the ground, meaning everything he prophesied came true. The sheer power of Hannah's selfless dedication literally shaped the course of an entire nation's history. But wait, the story doesn't even stop there. As a joyous result of her faithfulness, after she surrendered Samuel to God's service, the Lord visited Hannah again. She was blessed with 5 additional children. She surrendered one for a higher purpose, and her life was multiplied in ways she absolutely never could have imagined. Finally, Part 5, Finding Purpose in Affliction, the ultimate application. So how do we bring this ancient text directly into our modern lives? What's the takeaway for us today? Well, when we face blessings or afflictions, there's a pretty clear path forward. First, be your brother's keeper. Have compassion. Second, turn your pain into an opportunity to glorify God, just like Hannah did with her vow. Third, never, ever use your blessings to mock others who don't have what you have. And finally, realize that true usefulness on this earth is found in answering the will of God with your life. Actually having something and using it for a divine purpose is infinitely better than having it just to inflate your own ego. Really take this to heart. You were placed in this exact generation at this particular time through the parents you have and in the country where you live right now for a profound reason. You're not an accident, which means your specific context, including the hardships and the bitter afflictions you might be facing today, is an intentional setup for a much greater purpose. You have pain, you have struggles, but you also have a calling. Instead of letting bitterness totally consume you or treating life like some petty competition, try looking at your circumstances through a new lens. How will you use your affliction for His glory? Will you let it break you, or will you let it build a legacy? Think about that for a while. Thanks for joining me on